Hello there, dear listener. We hope you're enjoying this lovely discussion. If you're not already aware, this show is part of a podcast network called KWAZ Radio. A Pan-African nationalist and Garveyite network comes to showcasing the rich and varied thoughts of African people. We have an exciting lineup of shows that we think you'll enjoy, including
the Victor Maxine Podcast.
I think black people require too much buy-in. Like, we constantly have to sell black people on things that are beneficial to black people.
The Pro-Black Perspective Podcast.
I'm fearful that our people are not really studying how to get ahead, you know? And we're kind of, continually staying by.
The Harsh Reality Podcast.
It doesn't matter. I think people are so dumbed down. It wouldn't matter what you reveal to them. They still are in the matrix. They're in the simulation. They're going to keep doing what they did in the limits. So it really don't matter.
The Learning Curve Podcast.
Sexual access has never given you economic empowerment. The only person who has ever been economically empowered by a sexual relationship is the wasp and his opponent.
The Cathedral Cheek Show.
When we not radical enough to fight for our own, I guarantee you they'll stop doing what they're doing. I guarantee you they would have let their brother go. They just waiting to see what black folks is going to do.
Brother Bakari Podcast.
Black people love to claim folks that hate them, right? But they're slave masters, and they are ashamed of who they really are.
The Forecast Radio.
Like, if you pray to the same deity as, like, your enemy, and that God blesses your enemy more than you may want to reconsider who you pray to,
And Tanzan, African Mind.
Because generally, a welcoming of everyone, sometimes to my consternation, I think that they should be less, welcoming.
If you love our podcast network, we would be grateful if you could rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on social media, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and check out our website at www.kwazradio.com for more information. Thank you for tuning in. And now, back to the program.
Peace, family. Appreciate you stopping by. We're doing a different thing today. First off, we're starting a new book. We're going into introducing African science. This was recommended. The book was recommended 2 weeks ago on Shoot the Breeze. Brother Trigger Happy 262 Plus said that this would be a good book to go into. Now, there's a context to this. Koku from the Bit of Medicine podcast showed a video of Abadale Kambone saying, he was going over some kind of scientific breakdown of African spirituality. I didn't fully agree with the science, though. Like, a part of it was he was saying that like thoughts, for instance, are not physical, but the reality is that thoughts are physical. You can make the argument that that thoughts use some sort of energy, some sort of electrical impulses between neurons, but the neurons themselves are physical, and the neurons themselves are what make us think. Like I said, you could make a claim to electricity or electric impulses or energy being immaterial, not being physical. And that could, create an argument. But again, there is the physicality to thought. So I thought it was interesting. I kind of wish I could have spoke on it, but the time difference between America and Africa is very large, like 7 hours, I think. And so it's around 3 a.m. To 5, 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. And it's just harder to stay up, and plus the internet's not that great, which is another reason why I'm recording this in advance. Hopefully it'll be uploaded in time to have a premiere. But I'm saying all this to say that, this is the book that I want to go into, because I like my impression is that it's going to talk about like a non-materialist point of view, like an immaterialist point of view, or a spiritualist point of view. My book, for you those don't know, is about the materialist kind of point of view. And so I want to see to what extent this science is aligned with the science that I know. You know? Now, I want people to realize that, like, I want to do a disclaimer. There's actually two parts of this disclaimer that I want to do. The first is that challenging science is scientific. You know, a lot of, like, claiming that something is pseudoscience or something is wrong is a part of the scientific process. And even when I was in grad school, I came across a scientific paper, well established, 500 citations, so on and so forth. And I did the math behind it, and I said, this is wrong, and that's part of the scientific process is to find where something's wrong, challenge something. And one of the more popular examples in my discipline, which is astrophysics, if you guys don't know, in my discipline is this idea of the Big Bang Theory, right? The Big Bang Theory is just a cosmological origin story that is backed up with more evidence than the other cosmological stories. So some people may think, for instance, that the universe always existed, right? And they have physical proof toward that. And then the Big Bang Theory says, no, the universe was much smaller once upon a time. And the physical proof, and there's more compelling physical proof, like the cosmic microwave background. So both of these are the result of a scientific discussion, a scientific debate. One of them, or even both of them, can be pseudoscience. So dismissing any scientist, whether they're African or non-African, dismissing any scientist does not make you against the discipline, the entire discipline of, I don't, like when I was in grad school, me not liking this, not me recognizing that one astrophysicist made some mathematical errors, even basic mathematical errors in their paper doesn't make me dismiss the entire field of cosmology. Now, granted, I kind of was like that when I was younger, but, obviously there's some merit to astrophysics. All the same, if I find something that I don't agree with in this book, I'm not going to necessarily, going to say that, that I don't agree with the entire field of African science, or I'm dismissing that. So I'm just going to give that as a preface, as a precursor, because I do intend to be critical. I do intend to be, to be truthful and let you guys know what I'm thinking, or what I think is a reasonable thought in the moment. I do want to say this too. I want to preface this too. Unfortunately, I did record like 3 pages of this, and then I realized my mic wasn't on, so I deleted that recording because obviously it was useless. But so some of this I'm not reading, like the first 3 pages, like into the into the preface. Like some of it I've read already. But for the most part, you can expect this to be a new reading for me. And if it's a new reading for you, Caribou, welcome. Before we get started, though, I do want to remind you guys that I myself am an author that you can critically study, critically analyze. And right now, I'm actually asking for it. I wrote this book called All That Matters Is Matter. So you see I'm a materialist, right? All That Matters Is Matter. And in that book, I wrote a preview. So the preview is about, 12 pages or 20 pages, I don't know. But maybe 40 pages. Right? Like, 12, 20, 40, who cares, right? I think it's shorter printing. But the book is there. It's available. You can read it. You can criticize. I welcome commentary. Right now I'm trying to develop what I think will be the next classic. My next classic at least. Possibly my greatest book ever. In fact, arguably so. So if you want to be a part of the process, it's free. Just click on the link in the description. If you want to give a donation, you can. I don't want to say donation, but if you want to let's say, pay me for the entertainment, I don't know, or pay me for the knowledge, whatever, for the lesson, the lecture, whatever. You guys know my Cash App, right? I think it's $ABSOni. So you could hit that up. Much obliged, much appreciated. But other than that, let's get into it. Let me just remind you guys, like I said, about this book, and then we can go forward.
All that matters is matter. 21 choices for better life, wealth, and health.
Okay, and the other thing I want to say is that I'm actually laying down in bed right now. I'm kind of charging my Steam Deck, right? So my computer is a Steam Deck. I'm charging it right now, so I'm a little bit more limited in space too. But I'm laying down, so if you don't hear me giving that boisterous, bombastic, voice that you might expect from me, it's only because of that. Usually you should stand up when you're giving presentations, but because I'm reading, it might be like 40 pages, around 40 pages, I do not want to stand up the entire time. Plus, I don't have my equipment here in Tanzania anyway. So this is, just to tell you guys, this is Introducing African Science, a systematic and philosophical approach. Again, shout out to Trigger Happy 262 for the recommendation. And Jonathan O. Chimakonom, right? He's a PhD in the Department of Philosophy in the University of Calabar, Nigeria. So again, I was hating on Nigeria before, so we're going to continue that, just because. But realistically, this is actually a fundamental for us to do, to have our own universities. And from what I can glean, this brother is trying to encourage us to develop to reintroduce our own African sciences, which is really brilliant. I can't stress enough, because in my book, which is about materialism and so forth, we're emphasizing the need for materialism. So what I'm going to do is, you guys know I have glasses. I'm going to take off my glasses so I can better read this, because it's so close to my face. So this was written in 2012, published in the United States. We have changed since publication. Let me see if there's anything. Yeah, okay. So let's keep going. So this is, of course, what we're doing is we are discussing a philosophy book. So it's the Studies in African Philosophy, Science, Logic, and Mathematics. Studies in African Philosophy, Science, so on and so forth. They said you could write the Studies in Africa at Gmail, so let's do that. So this is the foreword. So it says, Introducing African Science, Systematic and Philosophical Approach. It's an interesting and insightful but thought-provoking book by Jonathan O. Chimakonem. It's a little book with big content, profound and far-reaching thoughts and articulations in one breath. It is a historical odyssey into African science, African logic, and African metaphysics and epistemology. The book does three things, namely it establishes that Africans had and still have a peculiar thought system, logic, and science. Second, it systemizes the science upon African logic and calls for it to be further studied and improved upon. And third, it makes a case for the institutionalization of African natural thought systems in our schools, such that education of the African child would be productive, because it is only by so doing that Africans, especially our scientists, can become true scientists and not some crank technicians who have nothing to show for their years of study. And so again, like I said, I'm using the Steam Deck, so I'm pressing the down key. It's like a joypad, more or less. And so if you accidentally, it's very sensitive, if you accidentally press left or right, you get shifted to the left or right. So that's why you might see this jumping. But anyway, so you can kind of see that, like what he's saying about science is really true, really important. The only other thing that I'm going to emphasize, like inside of my book, is that we also have to pay attention to the military. And I think I mentioned that around here. So he says, the question is, how do we expect the needed conceptual decolonization, re-education, and reorientation that are necessary for refocusing our mindset on our African way of reflection, on reality, and doing things which the author has tagged thought system. It is important to stress that it will take a national or continental decision to chart a course of doing things purely the African way, especially now that the entire continent appears to have been sucked irretrievably into the global marketplace. So, again, now there's two things to this. One is that Africa has always been a part of the global marketplace, for a really long time. Now, there were some isolated pockets that weren't, but for the most part, Africa was always a part of the global marketplace. But on the other hand, you know, if you're waiting for a national or continental decision, it's not going to happen, more or less. Like, it's not going to happen. I think our best bet, you know, a little biased, but I think our best bet is after I write my book. But, you know, even so, it's like if that's our best bet, you know, it's just not going to happen. You know what I'm saying? like not only did I not write this book, but it's not like I'm not Michael Jordan. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, so graphic policies, decisions, and actions are necessary from both the governments and education authorities to be able to accomplish this feat. And the reason why I say I'm not Michael Jordan is not just because I'm not Michael Jordan, but this book right here was written in 2012. You know, so it's like, if it were going to happen, it would have happened in the last 10 years, and it didn't, you know? So it's just like, you can't put your faith in, oh, something's going to happen, the right thing's going to happen. And that's why my book is going to encourage. It's like, you got to go out and get it. But we're just going to keep reading for the sake of time. However, we may advise, following the author's insight, that not so literate Africans who have not been polluted with the Western thought pattern and studying nature should be isolated and encouraged. Based on this, we want to recommend that the governments in Africa to start isolationist education programs where unpolluted Africans can be educated to test run some of these insights from the author. Now, again, in a real sense, this sounds ridiculous. You know, in a real sense, this sounds ridiculous. Like that, imagine you are a government official and you say, hey, look, let's invest $1 million US dollars, right? Or I guess $1 million US dollars in Tanzania, let's say Tanzania. Let's invest, I don't know, let's say 100 million Tanzanian shillings, right? Into a school, right? Where we get the most unlearned, the most unstudied people and just have them, you know, share their thoughts with each other. You know, it's just so like bizarre on a real sense that we would think that a country would do that. You know, and like if you want to see it in parallel, right? You could say to yourself, well, what if America said, you know what? Let's just go to the hillbillies, right? The hillbillies in America, and just let them pontificate. You know, pay them to pontificate, keep them alive, and pay them to pontificate, so that we can know what the Appalachian thought. And it's like, that's not a real thing. Now, granted, is there some sort of utility in Appalachian lore and stories? Sure, but America, which is rich, wouldn't do that, or would very unlikely do that. It might, you might have an interviewer go into the Appalachian Mountains and ask them questions and then walk out satisfied. But to create a school for the Appalachians in order that the Appalachian schools could replace the American schools, it's not even a thing. Granted, there's in our minds there's more merit for let's say Tanzania's Appalachians, or let's say Kilimanjaro people, or that might be the Chaga actually, but might be more merit for the Chaga to with the unpolluted Chaga to create their system and then implement it Tanzania wide. Although that's not even even saying that out loud is just not realistic. It's just not realistic. Because one thing you pick up on is that there are a lot of tribes in Tanzania, and nobody's because this guy's Nigerian too. Nobody is really trying to say, oh, you know what? It doesn't matter if I'm Haya, right? It doesn't matter if I'm Haha Hehe. It doesn't matter if I'm Kusa. It doesn't matter if I'm Tonga. We got to go follow the Chaga. When you don't understand African Kabila or tribes or ethnicities, that's when you say things like that. Now, granted, you might be like, well, what about we have the Chaga and the Hehe and the Haya, come together and form theories? And it's that's not even a thing either. Because if you understand, they would have been dramatically different from each other. If you anyway, we'll if it comes to it, we'll get into it. But I want people to realize that that's just not realistic. It's not really practical in the sense that you'd like it to be practical. So the theories and practices of their genius can now be systemized and written down. So yeah, simplicity of African science, as the author has enthused, should be encouraged so that we do not ape Western science to our destruction. Now again, I want people, this is the thing I was saying about the destructiveness of Western science. It's actually important to be destructive. It's actually important to be destructive. How do I say that? Like for instance, like with my son, right? It's important that I know how to discipline him. It's important that I know how to hurt him. In fact, I can even say this. So I have this woman. This woman sometimes has her son here, and I can't really discipline him like I would discipline my son, obviously, because I'm not really, because she might not she's not even okay with me, hitting my own kid, let alone her little kid, right? And he doesn't seem like he gets a spanking or anything, but because of that, his mother might be the primary disciplinarian for him, right? So if I want him to not do something, I could tell him, but I kind of also have to be like that snitch guy. You know what I mean? I have to be that guy. Like, he doesn't want his mother to tell him not to do something, which is fine. Or I think recently I told him, do not touch this computer, right? Have a computer. Do not, and he was looking at me like, oh, I feel hurt, But that's what you have to know about people. You have to know how to hurt them, because otherwise they're gonna just do things without, you can't check them. You have to know how to check somebody, and that's important too. And so what the Westerner does, the Westerner knows how to check people, and we call it, they're being destructive, and a part of it is that they are destroying the planet, sure, but the other part is that they are studying how to check people. You get what I'm saying? Because you got to think of it this way: I'm a man, you're a man, right? Or or a woman, right? But I'm a man, or you're a man or a woman. But can I tell you to go do something? No. Like for instance, I told you guys, hey, hit up the Cash App. I mean, obviously this is a recording, so blah blah. But let me just say, if 0 people hit up the Cash App, I'm not surprised. You know what I'm saying? I'm not surprised. So what I'm saying, and I'm saying that to say that I can't, and here's what I mean, like this. Even if you do hit up the Cash App, which is, thank you, right? But I can't force you to. You see what I'm saying? Now, check this. February comes, or was it April, right? April comes. Are you paying your taxes in America? You understand? That's the big difference. Now, obviously, you might say, hey, owner, you're not a tax. Owner, you don't build my roads. You don't do any of this stuff. And, and you might happily pay your taxes because you feel like you're getting roads. That's what I say to myself. That's what I say to myself, too. So I don't blame you. But the reality is this white boy is forcing you because he developed the science too. And if at some point, if really he didn't have the force, right, maybe you might pay taxes because you're a good person. Congratulations, right? But a lot of people wouldn't. Okay? A lot of people wouldn't. And we know this because a lot of people do not pay for most things if they don't have to. But we don't have to go into too much of a thing. I was just whatever, right? So, and let me just make sure that this recording is recording, right? Otherwise, if it's the third time, I'll be like, yo, F it, right? All right, so benefits of hindsight and foresight should aid us in pursuing a science and technology that is medium range, avoiding the devastating effects of present-day Western science, and yet with total efficacy as African science promises. So again, when I read this, I'm not going to try to be dismissing African science. Like, shout out to my brother Kelji verse, who would tell you African science is different from Western science. But like, again, even in the Western sciences, you could be dismissive of a particular scientist, and like, even when it comes to like African thought, you could be dismissive of me and still be accepting of other people. And what I wanted to say, I think I said this last time before my recording was like not recording. My 3 favorite, Garvey, Nyerere, and Cooks. So you guys check those people out. All right, so and if you're not following me on Twitter or X, follow me. I put up some books the other day. So Dr. And if you want some more books, by the fact, let's go on to Discord. There's a whole bunch of books there, including this book. All right. So Dr. Jonathan Chimonkonem has, like a wounded lion, made his point in such an able and persuasive way that we cannot but share his sentiments and convictions. Now, actually, you know what? In retrospect, I don't know what he's talking about. Like a wounded lion made his point in such a persuasive way? What does that even mean? It may be advisable both to encourage and join him in pursuing these noble ideas to their logical conclusion. No knowledge is a waste, and none should be despised. We invite all lovers of Africa, scientists, philosophers, researchers, students, to get a copy of this book, read, and be inspired for greater breakthroughs in African science, logic, metaphysics, and epistemology. With his towering intellectual accomplishment, Dr. Jonathan Chimonkonem has not only proven that Africans are capable of revolutionary thought, but has emerged as one of the leading original thinkers on the continent. In fact, in this piece of adorable literature, Jonathan could be said to have done for Africa what thinkers like Francis Bacon did for the West. In all, I think this is an unprecedented attempt to wake us all up from our colonial complacency and cultural ineptitude. Intellectually, we have been challenged to write constructively and creatively, rather than the usual commentary on Western creative thoughts, which have been the trademark of most African academics. Africans must arise and carve a niche for themselves in the match of world civilization by deserving their G-given area of comparative advantage in order to contribute to the pool of global resources and humanity's general well-being on our planet Earth. Now, again, I don't use this word. I wouldn't use this word, and I hope he's not using this word throughout the book, but we'll go on. She adopted as one of the introductory texts of the science as the text for the general study course on history and philosophy of science in our secondary schools and universities. See no reason anymore why we should study Western sciences without studying our own science, especially now. This book is a must-read for all and sundry. I wholeheartedly recommend it to all. Happy reading. Professor Gio Azumba, Head, Department of Philosophy of the University of Calabar, Nigeria. So, and again, this is like a glowing review. I kind of wonder if I should get somebody to do my own preface. I know that I'm not going to, but I kind of feel like I should. And so, what do you guys think? You guys think I should ask Pastor Mark? Like, hey, write me a glowing thing. Yeah, right. He'll be all. If you guys don't know, he's a good brother on X. Anyway, so let's see. This is the preface. So I'm going to plug out my thing for a little bit so I can have a little bit more flexibility. Hopefully the power does not run out, but if it does, I'll just charge it a little later. So this is the preface, and I think I only read up the first up to this, and then I realized I wasn't recording. And again, we're at page 11 already, and we just want to go to page 40 or thereabouts. We'll see exactly. I think it's like the first 2 chapters. We'll see exactly when we get to the table of contents, but just prefacing it for you guys. So I remember my first days in school, the only language I spoke was Igbo. I could not remember learning it. Now, here's what I want to tell you guys, what I told you guys last time. Obviously, I didn't tell anybody this because it's a recording. I deleted the recording, whatever. But I'm just, talking. So the Igbo, I'm not 100% sure, but I think they're an intelligent group in Nigeria. So in Tanzania, there's this ethnicity, like this tribe. I don't remember the name, but I think it's Haya. Right? I think I mentioned them a couple of times, right? And they are like supposedly like the majority of professors and so forth here in Tanzania. So like everything fair, they are like the brilliant ones, right? The smart ethnicity. So if you were to practice some eugenics and try to have a smart kid, like finding a Haya, whatever, so a romantic partner might be to your benefit. And I think if you were inside of Nigeria, right? Now, granted, if you want a dark skin, you could go to like another group of people. If you want this, a group good at money, could be Chaga, so on and so forth, right? But in terms of intelligence, the Haya are considered an intelligent ethnicity. I think inside of Nigeria, it's the same with the Igbo. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's the Igbo. Granted, a lot of people do not like the Igbo in Nigeria, but again, it's Nigeria. Nigeria, I realized in retrospect, a lot of the people that like a lot of the worst takes you're going to find online, or a lot of the worst people you're going to find online, are going to be from Nigeria, just for what it's worth. And I wouldn't recommend people go to Nigeria either. So anyway, like I recommend South Africa. No, I recommend Ghana and Tanzania. I also want to check out South Africa, but as far as like other countries, very few, very few, and Nigeria is not one of the few. All right, so anyway, so I remember my first days in school, the only language I spoke was the Igbo. I could not remember learning it. My mathematics orientation was the Igbo numeric system. Again, I could not remember taking lessons from anyone, not even from my parents or playmates, yet I know it, just as it is in me, and it is. I fully understand what anyone means when he utters a sentence in ordinary language, and I follow the most rigorous description of reality done in mathematical language of my people. Once I form an idea in my mind, I do not think of the words to employ it, expressing it. Perfect words very readily begin to flow out of my mouth. However, in my first days in school, after a lengthy excitement, I came to be placed with the first shock of my life. Knowledge is essential in this world, and one has to learn every piece of knowledge to survive in it. So, have I learned anything before? No. Now, again, you're going to see that the editing here is bad. Like, right here, you can say lady, and then it's going to be, like he's talking about a man. I don't know. But, like, you kind of see, you open the quotation marks, and then there's no closing of the quotation marks. But I'm guessing it ends here. You know? And then he's kind of talking to himself. It's weird. But anyway, that's okay, though. Like he said, his first language is Igbo, not English. You know? I know English because, you know, I was born in a settler colony. You know? I guess Nigeria is not really a settler colony. It was just a regular colony. So there's that, you know, that advantage. But anyway, so he says, knowledge is essential. Have I learned anything before? No, since I have never sat to take lessons. I know nothing. What does this mean? It means that everything I thought I knew was not essential. The real knowledge is the white man's own. Do you have any? No. Since I do not have any, I am not just ignorant, I am a fool. To wash this off, I have to be prepared to reject every rubbish that found its way into my mind, including my language. It was a primitive noise-making. The very first step to my becoming civilized is to banish it forever from my tongue and make haste to speak the true language of civilized men, in my case, English. I remember now with bitterness one of the very first shocking discussions I held with my peers after our first day in school. Some of us folded our arms across our chests in awe of disbelief and great confusion. Our teacher, a slender lady who never uttered a single word of the Igbo language that day, instructed us with a dry countenance that it was prohibited to speak our beloved mother tongue. He reminded us that the class monitor was standing by to take down the names of anyone who broke the strange law. Such a bushman would sweep the class and darken the board for 7 days. We were animals. It was the duty of the teachers to wean us and turn us into civilized humans. So our language was a bush language. Some of us wondered in awe. So everything we knew was nothing sensible. So this is as far as I read before. I was kind of like confused about the he part, and then I checked it and I was like, oh wait, I'm not even recording. So I was a little stupid, but yeah, interesting. But again, so I want people to realize. So again, besides the bad grammar, which is, you know, expected, which is okay. It's not the worst thing in the world. I mean, apparently I have like some grammatical errors in Book of Power too. Somebody made reference to one, but it was kind of significant. I'm not gonna hold you. So apparently I use a certain term wrong all the time, but you know, just randomly. But anyway, so it's not bad to, you know, to have errors. It's kind of hard. Even if you have editors, it's still like it's a stylistic choice possibly. But what were we saying here? We were animals, blah, blah, blah. Now, here's the thing. I want people to realize, too, there's two things to this. There's three things to this. One, this is a child's interpretation, right? Like, he's telling us, hey, as a child, you know, I mean, I don't know how old he was, but he says his first day of school. Now, his first day of school could have been when he was older, but, you know, I don't get the impression that it was when he was older. Although it's not, like, he doesn't say, so it doesn't matter, right? I don't want to speculate on how old he was. It's impossible to know. Well, it's impossible, not impossible, but it's just very, like, I couldn't know based off of the information I've given. And that's something that's a scientific perspective right there. You just say, look, I don't know. It's better to know that you don't know than to, foolishly attribute random meaning, to symbols. That's not really an ancient Egyptian quote, but like it's an ancient idea, kind of, right? But anyway, so why I was saying that, so I was like, yeah, we don't know how old he was. Sounds like he was old. I mean, sounds like he was young, but this is a child's interpretation in the sense that he was a young person. I don't know if they were saying you were animals, but here's the thing. If a Westerner, if I want to communicate with somebody, there's two things that you could, there's three things you could do. Let's just say there's three things. There's a few things you could do. Let's say a few things. One, you could learn their language, or two, they could learn your language. And the reality is this: if you're educating somebody, they're supposed to learn your language, because if you're educating somebody and you're using literature, right? You can't, if you don't know their language, you can't give them literature. You know what I mean? So if I want people to learn about, actually, I was gonna say Shakespeare or some shit, but let's say, for instance, yesterday, KW.7, shout out to KW.7, he was like, hey, it sucks that most African people haven't read Chancellor Williams' Destruction of Black Civilization, right? And it's like, yeah, Destruction of Black Civilization is a good book in English. You know what I mean? So, I agree with the sentiment. Yeah, black people should be reading. Well, I don't know for every black person, but I don't know if a lot of black people should even read it. But yeah, it's a good book, right? If you were trying to teach black people about Destruction of Black Civilization, the easiest way to do it is if they know English. The hardest way to do it is to translate it into every African language. A secondly, moderately easy way is to transfer it into a large African language, right? But that's the thing about the British attempt in Africa, is that, was there really a large African language? Because when we say Swahili is big today, Swahili is big today because of Nyerere in Tanzania. You know what I mean? It's because of partly because of the Arabs too. But what I'm saying is that it's not so big that everybody and their mother would know it in Tanzania if not for Nyerere, if not for the national government. You know what I mean? Because the reality is that a lot of people don't even know it. So we went to a different city outside of Dar, and they weren't speaking Swahili and they weren't speaking English. So if I were to try to bring books in Tanzania, sure, I would do Swahili or English. But the Swahili recommendation is more so connected to Nyerere than it is to let's say if I were 500 years ago, would I bring Swahili books to every area? And of course, could I produce Swahili books? Are there Swahili books in England? Are there Swahili books in America? You see what I'm saying? So when he says, hey, look, they were treating us like animals and our language is stupid and they didn't want us to instruct, it's no, you're trying to instruct people. And a part of your instruction of people is that they speak that language. But anyway, I think I'm putting too much time into explaining this kind of stuff. But hopefully it's a good thing. So, and then the class started in earnest, fearful, though, of this unexpected shock. Some of us were resolute to impress our elegant myths with our willingness to abandon the bush ways of our fathers. We learned the parts of speech, a total abstruse and complicated subject. But some days in the struggle, some of us were beginning to cram the lot the teacher had been saying. John is a good boy. We had with great difficulty remarked the part of speech each of the words was. All of a sudden the teacher had changed her example. Peter is a good boy. No one was sure what part of speech Peter was. This became a tricky business. For some months we still got confused each time familiar words were changed. Then some smart ones among us discovered an easy way out. Learn the meaning of every word, then transliterate to Igbo for proper understanding. Also, symphony and transliteration became a way out for unfamiliar words. Jesus spoke to the multitude. Transliterates by symphony to Jesus Gara Ndi Muo Neti Udu Aku. Translates back to English as Jesus talked to the masquerades who were beating drums. Okay, I don't know what symphony is, but okay. Right? Alright. Thus we began to score poorly sometimes to escape the shameful confusion that ensued each time a word is changed. We had to abandon pictorial symbolization and cramming and seek for understanding. To get this, consulting with our mother tongue was a smart escape route. This helped to a great extent, but invaluable time and energy were lost, and a terrible vicious cycle ensued. After the morning lessons, we went on break. And by the way, I think maybe he might say how old he was here. So when I said it was impossible to know, obviously, if he says it, it's not impossible to know, or if he said it somewhere else, it's not impossible to know. But I was just saying based off the information. All right. So after the morning lessons, we went on break. Those who could not withstand the madness anymore ran home, while some of us who had been sternly warned not to run back home braved it and stayed for the remainder of the school hour. It was time for classwork. School is a great place of learning. Mention other two great places of learning. As usual, we began to... Oh, okay. This was a question. School is a great place of learning. Mention other two great places of learning. And so, look at this question right here. I want people to realize that white folk get you to snitch. White folk ask you to snitch, and we do. I told you guys, I had this paper one time when I was in college, and the teacher was like, I was in a feminist class, women's studies class, and the professor was like, what are other ways to spread the message of feminism? You know? And like, for credit, I would tell her. You know, I would say, hey, why don't you go online and go on Discord? Not Discord, but Discord was the thing I did, like Reddit or something. I don't know. But go on Reddit and go on this, and then, you know, so on and so forth. And the teacher's like, good, thanks. You know? And so here you have, you know, great places of learning, right? You have the teacher is asking you to share intel, right? And you just think you're getting extra credit. You just think they're testing your, you know, they're giving you something familiar. But really, they're trying to get you to tell them. Anyway, you kind of see that they got caught and, you know, said schools. But anyway, it is what it is. As usual, we begin to transliterate. Ulo, akwukwo, bu, obodobo, ebem, tu, muta, ka, udidi, obua, ozo. So the only word here I recognize is ka. And not from Igbo, I mean from, and it means sitting, by the way. So let's see what it says here. Translate back to English as, well, actually sitting or staying, but anyway. Translate back to English as, school is a big, wide, big place of imitation. State two other types. So I think he meant initiation here, but school is a big, wide, big place. Yeah, okay. Of imitation. State two other types of schools. So let's see, Udidi. So let's see if Ka relates to. Oh no, so I think Ka might be state. I don't know. I couldn't tell. But so with this already distorted meaning, we wrestled much longer, sweating from our brow and twisting had our brains ensnared in the vicious cycle of transliterating and translating back and forth. Finally, a weary and sullen, we produced our answers. St. Stephen's Primary School and St. Augustine's Primary School. Our own school was the big, wide, big place of imitation. The two above are just the other types. The problem with ordinary language were nothing compared to what awaited us in mathematical language. One, we eventually learned, was the same as Otu. Two is a sign that has the same meaning as this. Okay, but to us is hanging. It is not really meaningful until we know what it qualifies. So if two is the same as our hanging, then two what? When we were told it does not matter whether it was two something or two nothing, two is always two, this made no sense at all. Rather than annoy us, it confirmed our worst fears. We were bushmen indeed, who not only knew nothing, but may never be able to learn civilization. There were no smart way out. We know that 2 tubers of yam added to another 2 tubers would be 4 tubers, but we do not know that 2 added to 2 would be 4. To us, they were empty. That's pretty interesting. Some of us who were able to let go of the way we reason and struggle to make sense of the senseless white man's ways became known as brilliant and intelligent chaps. Some of us who only then were not smart enough to do this became the dullards, or more usual, coconut heads, who term after term took home the teacher's recommendation that we be sent to learn some trade, to our most times agonized parents. The thought of being deployed to the big market at Onitsha, or the one at Aba for trade apprenticeship, under some imposing master pressured some of us to strive even harder. In our days, the kids who got such recommendations were the dummies of this world, the shame of their families. To escape this lowly fate, most of us waged a longish identity war, confused and petrified, just to get civilized. And we get pushed over from class to class. As we got pushed over from class to class, we began to learn social studies, integrated science, etc., where they teach us some theories. One of such theories is evolutionism. Life, including the human life, evolved. Man even shared genealogy with apes. At death, man turns dust and fertilizes the crops. That our fathers were sons of apes made no sense. That our elders perished to become mere dust sounded like a joke. What happened to life after life? What of the ancestors? What of reincarnation? Are all these things also lies? Very few of us have begun to accept the white man's civilization, while many had fully imbibed it and long forgotten our ways. Those of us who were still too dull to shake off our native reasoning hid this great weakness with the gut of our lives, and in great confusion managed every now and then to admire those who had succeeded to do this long ago. So I do want to say about this, I actually don't disagree with this stuff. Man sharing genealogy with apes, that makes sense. Turning into dust, I mean, obviously not dust, but yeah. That makes a lot of sense, and the reason why I say it makes sense is this: what happens with the cow? When a cow dies, what happens to the cow? You know, and does the cow reincarnate? And if they do, like, why? Or better yet, you don't think the cow reincarnates. So why do you reincarnate and the cow doesn't? You know. I cannot remember excelling, or if you do think the cow reincarnates, then, like, where? You know, like, where? All right. I cannot remember excelling in any subject, however hard I tried to impress my teachers. My own inclinations, the reasoning pattern of my native Africa was a great barrier. So, no, it's okay, it's okay. Discoloring the good civilizations I was taught, and thereby always giving me poor grades. I remember in my junior secondary class, one of my teachers asked with the intent to mock if I was a pagan. After a test in introductory technology, at that stage I had started writing volume, and in that instance I remember describing how the powers of the great deities could be harnessed for technological purposes. The question was, mention 5 uses of technology. To my great undoing, I had become notorious to my teacher for what they called my fetish write-ups. Some, as I came to learn years later, regarded me as a poor, disoriented boy with slight brain damage. How on earth could a sensible man refuse civilization? And it's like, yeah, okay. I mean, I can see that. Again, the Westerner is not there to make friends. He's there to make laborers. He's there to make servants. You know? I don't know if I would go as far as to say brain damage, right? But like, yeah, if I'm trying to make a servant, like, yeah. And then the servant's like, yeah, man, you know, if I could use the great powers. You're like, what are you doing? I'm trying to make a servant out of you. You know? Like, hello, you're in this system so that you can be my servant. What are you writing about this stuff for? But anyway. But I'm not refusing civilization. I was fighting hard to civilize without success. Not until I got to the tenure class had I read a great many Western literature, especially history, did I first learn to stop fighting myself. What I had was an advantage and worth keeping. My superior mindset and efficacious reasoning pattern was beginning to distinguish me among my peers. Thinking outside of the box was a general problem to them. Creating solutions was a hard task for them, too. Yet I excelled. I lived and thought from our native African reasoning pattern. For this, it was easy for me to harness the powers of my mind. For them, they had been indoctrinated with the Western thought system, but because it was strange to them, they never could think out of the box. No matter how hard they tried, the apparatus was a barrier which lured them into the vicious circle. For this godly ability, my peers nicknamed me the Wise Man, a name most of them still call me to this day. They wondered how I came to think so deeply and see things hidden from everyone. It was also after this realization that I began to score good grades. I learned during my examinations to keep my inclinations aside and see what the teachers want me to see. Before long, I was excelling in literature, government, commerce, and even won some school awards in these subjects. Pretty cool. But Pretty cool story. So during this period, I had started some experimentation in the backyard of my father's house. I could not make the science class because of my notorious poor grades, but I started experiments in chemistry, physics, architecture, and astronomy. So I wonder what an experiment in astronomy is. I think he said something about he discovered 10 planets. What the fuck? And the 50 planets? What? Alright, let's just read it in time. This was a period I reached a conviction after studying the map of the galaxy and gazing repeatedly at the horizon from my village hilltop that there must be many other planets besides the 9 we were taught in school. By 2010, some years later, the 10th planet was discovered, and by 2011, additional 50 followed. When discussing the possibility of many planets with the excellent science students in those days, they laughed me off and quoted many theories I had not known. The belief in such Western-created paradigms was a barrier to them. Instead of seeing the textbook theories as mere occasional references, they had been trained to see them as the basis, the laws, the guides, and the roof of all thinking. They only struggled to read all there is. The problem, therefore, was that in terms of practice, they could never think beyond those doctrines. It had become a dogma to them, and because the books contained solved problems and sometimes footnotes of unsolved ones, the solved problems offered no inspiration for new research, and the unsolved ones become, for them, unsolvable. So I'm actually wondering if I should read 40 pages, because I'm only on 16. Well, I guess I'm halfway, so it's not that bad, but still. I'll look into it. So let's keep going. But what did I say? What, he discovered 50 planets? What is he talking about? On it with his eyes? Like, that's just kind of crazy, but alright. I don't know. I mean, like he's saying, like, the Western trained are saying that's crazy, and maybe it's not crazy. Maybe it's practical, but it's interesting. It's interesting. Like, part of me is curious, you know? Are these, in fact, planets? But anyway, so he says, I live with these annoying circumstances. And again, it might just be, you know, lack of translation. Like, I could tell you guys, I'm talking to these women. One of these women, she's like, I'll talk to you later, right? Or bye, like in the middle of the day. It's like 5 o'clock. She's like, bye, I'll talk to you later. Oh, we'll chat later. And then I say something else, and she's like, good evening. So I tell her good night, right? Hope you sleep well, right? Next day, she writes me like, why did you tell me good night? Like, why'd you go to bed at 6 p.m.? And I'm like, I didn't go to bed at 6 p.m. You just said good evening. And so I said good night. And then, like, we were talking a little more, and she's like, oh, so you don't care if I'm doing X, Y, Z? And I'm like, I never even said that. You know, I said, I just wanted to give you some space. Right? And she's like, you want to give me some space to go, you know, talk to other people or some shit? And we're like, what? No, I just said, like you want some private space? And she's like, oh, you don't care. And you're like, what's going on? But, like, a part of it is that, like what words mean in America, they might not mean the same thing in Tanzania. And I don't know, I think there was something else going on, honestly, because, you know, she never argues with me, so it's like my first argument, if you will, and it was just kind of like, I was kind of blindsided because it didn't make any sense, but, like, it's also, like, possibly a cultural thing. Like, somebody was saying, if I ran it by some other lady, and she was like, hey, if a woman tells you good evening in the middle of the day, you got to figure out what's going on. Whereas, like I said, in America, it's like, they tell you good evening in the middle of the day, you're like, okay, I'll have a nice day, I'm living my life. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, I'm not, you know, caught up on no motherfucking phone, but it is what it is. I'm just saying that, like, when he says 50 planets, like, what is he talking about? Because, like, what are you talking about? That's 50 planets you can see with your naked eye, no less. Because you would think more people would see it. Become them unsolvable. I live with these annoying circumstances, so let's see. Did I skip anything? Let me see. I'll just read this just in case. What the fuck? Sorry, I shouldn't curse. Where are we? The book contains solved problems and sometimes footnotes of unsolved ones. The solved problems offer no inspiration for new research, and unsolved ones become for them unsolvable. Because they could never think beyond the doctrines. Yeah, okay. I lived with these annoying circumstances. The university was a place of research. I was going to excel there, was my little consolation. When I finally secured admission and attended the first few classes, some of my teachers humiliated me when I answered the questions in the class, wondering where this man was coming from. that reminded me of my secondary school chemistry teacher, who in a similar circumstance had asked if I came from a zoo. My answer to this question probably depicted a man who had not been civilized. Quickly, I switched back to my formula of keeping my inclinations aside during examinations, but during class debates, I vented them. Soon I began to win followerships among my classmates, and I would come around to teach them mental liberation after classes. Once again, my obvious superior mindset and deep thinking ability enamored them that they gave me a nickname, Demiurge. Demiurge was a Greek god, the divine craftsman of Plato's writing. So I became a god among them, and most of them still call me by this name to this day. Very few actually remember my real name, which is Jonathan. And, like, why? Anyway, well, I hope it's not Jonathan. The point of it sounds like it might actually be Jonathan, but it's Jonathan, right? Let me just double check. Oh yeah, see, Jonathan. It's like, who? What? Okay. Did I go faster, bro? I need to stop going backwards. What's going on? So we passed this. If you remember my name, where is that? Yeah, okay. So the point of this tedious personal story, yeah, is to show, it's like, yo, I'm just so great. I'm just so good. I'm a god, basically. Yeah, okay. The point of this tedious personal story is to show how the Western system robs the African of his originality. To shock the African child experience initially, how he learned about the subhuman nature of Africans and their ways and how he began to struggle to civilize. Eventually he loses everything African and found to his humiliation that despite his learning, he could not help thinking within the Western thought system. He acts without positive thought and thinks without positive action. If he was a physicist, he became a technician, fixing bolts and nuts. He would never invent. If he was a pharmacist, he became one who prescribes drugs. He could never produce one himself. And so Africa boasts of millions of scientists who could not invent any technology. The problem is not only the school system, but that this system had produced guinea pig teachers who are in turn producing other guinea pigs. It does look as if there is no way of breaking out of this box, but maybe we should start somewhere. If after reading this book you find in it any conviction that Africa has a peculiar thought system, then the purpose for undertaking this difficult task might have been achieved. So, what do I want to say about this? He says, the shock of African humiliation, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so they say, look, the system robs the African of his originality. Yeah, it's supposed to. Again, the system is designed to create servants. You know, you don't need an original servant. You know, when you have a servant, you need them to, let's say, wash the dishes. You need them to prepare food. You need them to, clean the bed. You don't need originality from that. You know? Or if you have a servant who, like I said, if you want them to write your books, or you want them to call your contacts, or you want them to, let's say, input data into the computer, again, you do not need originality for that. The school systems were not made for you to be original. The school systems were made for you to be a servant. And that's fine. It makes a lot of sense. You know, if humans did not serve other humans, or if humans did not help other humans, to say, right, it would just be a lot harder of an experience. So anyway, I have taken time in this little book to systematize African science fit with African thought system. The way we look at reality is different from the way the Europeans and the Asians look at reality. Their possibilities are not always our possibilities, and ours may not always be theirs. There is no rule that validates theirs and invalidates ours. The only difference is that excellence for the Negroid, the Caucasoid, and the Mongoloid is tied to their unique thought system. A native Negroid could never think successfully within the Caucasian system, and vice versa. For us, therefore, systematizing African science is about raising its methods, criteria, theories, methodologies, schools, and other basic explanations. We also recognize the need to adopt from the West some of its advances, but then adapt such to the African system. The section on the logic of African science is aimed at describing how Africans reasons, which is different from how the Western people do. This is important in understanding the African mindset and the great advantage it provides for the African researcher. This work describes what the scientists do and what makes science different from other spheres of knowledge, only that it does this with reference to African science. On this score, it provides the intending African scientists with a platform and direction. This book is also written to inspire and instigate, but it's not written to control or suggest. The intending African scientist must generate his research ideas and pursue it at the level he wishes. This is a rule book only as far as it draws a line between what is scientific and what is superstitious on one hand, and what is African science and what is Western science on the other hand. Finally, this book should not be construed as containing research codes beyond the thought system of Africans, else it becomes a barrier on another race. A great deal of scientific technologies have been coined using a native African language, and where essential ingredients of African logic and mathematics have been employed to produce explanations. For some years now, so again, this sounds interesting, but we have to look into it. Whether there is, and I can't remember if I talked about it this time or last time, but whether there is an African science versus a Western science and what that means, I think it's interesting to explore. I do want to say, however, a lot of people do not like those generalizations of African science versus Western science versus so on and so forth. But we'll see, we'll see how he handles that generalization. Like, for instance, because Nigeria is very, very far from Tanzania, let's say, so, is it a uniform science between those two countries or not? We'll see if he mentions that. So for some years now, scholars in many African universities, especially Nigeria, have been occupied with the concept and system of African science. Some notable ones include Professor Udo Itok and his work on New Humanism, Associate Professor Kieran Ojong, his Philosophy of Science for Africa, Professor Andrew Udungwoman, and Dr. Chris Apkan in their paper on the methods of African science, Professor Innocent Asuzu in his work on complementary reflection, and Ibion Yidanda ontology, late Professor Pantaleon Iroegbu in his work on KPIM series, Professor Emmanuel Ede, his pioneering work on Igbo metaphysics, Professor Uzodimma Nwala in his historic Igbo philosophy, Professor Godfrey Ozumbo in his philosophy and methods of integrative humanism. So this is Godfrey Ozumbo is the one who wrote the preface. Professor Chris Ijoma, Theory of Harmonious Monism, and Dr. Egbe Oja's dissertation on comparative study of Western and African science explanations on certain realities, to mention just a few. By the way, I think I read at one point Igbo philosophy book. I don't remember the name of it though, and it's obviously not in my library right here. So, also a number of conference papers have also been presented on the topic. Notably, Associate Professor Francis Ndruku in his paper "The Identity of the Particular: An African Basis for Philosophy, Science, and Development." C. Osuangul, that's seems like a common name, in his African Cybercosmos, Science and World Order, etc. Personally, I have presented a few in different conferences. Some of such papers include a project on African logic, from thought system to algorithmic model, impact on science, technology, and human development, outlines of African logic for the development of thought, science, and technology in Africa. Ozumbo's integrative humanism project as a veritable theory for a model of explanation in African science. Sorry, I'm a little bit sick. I'm sorry. Systematizing African science, methods and theories, philosophy, and Africa's return to history. Systematizing African science, the genesis. Further, we may still mention all those who have done foundational research, such as Temples Placide, late Professor C.S. Momo, Professor Kwasi Wiredu, John Mbiti. So I actually heard of John Mbiti. Professor, he wrote a philosophy book. Udobata Unanwa, Professor Onyewoni, Onyanwo, and Rook, etc. Their works are precursors to the present research, and as such, a huge honor is due these authors. There is no doubt, therefore, that there will soon emerge a course on African science in our universities. What I have done in this work represents a modest attempt at systematizing Africa's age-long scientific practices. Some African scholars currently working on this same project might find my presentation unsatisfactory in some respects, but it is my wish that it challenges them to publish theirs, that they see the whole project as an ongoing effort into the great endeavor. Finally, I've chosen the title Introducing African Science based on the advice of my editors, for it seems this is likely the first text on the subject. So I do want to say this, that it's really, really good that they are identifying their own, or our own, science branch. You know, it's African science, and they're really deliberate with expressing it as, you know, a science for, let's say, Negroes, if you will. I think that's a pretty good thing that comes from this book. And so I'll just leave it at that. So in chapter 1 of this work, we gave an historical and metaphysical background to the theory of African science, and offering a justification for the project is because, to as little as makes sense of the people's thought system and understanding their background, metaphysics is paramount. The chapter 2 described the logic of our science, for we believe that to understand any theory, an adequate grasp of its logic is vital. And so I think we're going to just read the first 2 chapters, but we're going to keep going. Like, I really need to go to the bathroom, man. In chapter 3, we produced an African science interpretation to such fundamental scientific terms as space, natural world, matter, antimatter, and energy. So this actually sounds like an interesting chapter. By the way, if you guys don't know, one of the scientific brothers in the YouTube space is our brother Organic African Paradigm. So you guys can check him out for another take on African science too. But let's keep going. Chapter 4 dwelt on such areas as nature and scientific truth, time and motion, space, and the subnatural world, as well as thought and extension. Explanations offered to these subjects further gave shape to the project. The methods of doing African science were the focus of Chapter 5, while Chapter 6 explicates the basic criteria of African science. Chapter 7, the methodologies of African science, were discussed, just as Chapter 8 focused on systematized theories in our science. The Chapter 9 dwelt on its laws, and Chapter 10 discussed African logic and the principles of deniability. In Chapter 11, we focused on the schools of African science, in addition to the dicey issue of the metaphysics of African experimental science. In the final chapter, we discussed the subject of explanation in African science, made striking comments in the postscript, and outlined some of the major challenges of the newly systematized science. This book surely deserves to be chewed, swallowed, and digested, as a great scholar once said. So finally, from the year 2007, when this research commenced to its completion, I benefited from the advice, encouragement, and recommendations of some persons. I owe enormous gratitude to you all, teachers, colleagues, and relations. I take special delight also in my divine inspirer, who illuminates my mind without reason. However, one name that must be mentioned. I think he's talking about. Oh, okay. I thought he was talking about his wife, but he's talking about some imaginary being. Anyway, all right. One name that must be mentioned here is Lady Elizabeth Okeke, 1960 to 2012. Aw, and 2012 is when he published his book too. That's sad. A resilient mother for training me in character and funding my learning. I'm kind of sad I said "aw" like that, but you know, the thing is this: if you lose your mother, or if you lose your mother, you're gonna you'll begin to sympathize. Like you're not as strong as you once were, you know. So if you're like, hey, dude, you sound weak with that, right? Just realize, yeah, you know, you lose something. Anyway, so you always reminded me that whatever dream I had must be realized. Here, for there is no vision in eternity. The completion of this research is a heed well taken. For all those and the ones I can't quite mention here, I deeply appreciate with fond memories. JOC 2012. That sucks. Because that's the same year. All right, so dedication to Lady Elizabeth Obi Okebe, a mother like no other, whom I would still pick out for a mother at reincarnation. For all your traits as a widow in a polygamous African home and in a society rife with strife and poverty, and for swimming against the tide and accomplishing even what most men could not, I fondly dedicate this work to you with immense gratitude. I wonder if I should put my mother, but anyway, polygamous African home, that's pretty interesting. Widow in a polygamous African home. So alright, so let's go to the table of contents. Oh no, it's not even yet. So for man, everything he needs, and or he shall need, has been provided. With leaves and the like, we can perform any action, which modern science, Western, cannot anticipate, or even in the next 10,000 years or more. Nwanko, Nabuchi, in defense of evil belief system. So they believe that they can do anything with the leaves. Okay. And again, I don't try. I don't mean to sound too dismissive, but you know. So all right. So, shit. Okay. So I think. So I'm actually 25 pages into the PDF, but it doesn't even count as one of the pages. So what I'm going to do is, because originally I was thinking I was going to read chapter 1 and chapter 2, but that's another 30 pages, right? I don't want to read another 30 pages when I already read 25 pages. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to read chapter 1. Next week, it would be, this is like it's 20-something pages. So next week I could probably read like up to chapter 5 or something. Or up to chapter 6. And that would be, wait, let me see, 13 to... No, 64, that's too long. Next week I could probably read chapters 2 and 4. And that would be about, that's 35 pages. But I think it could work out. And then let's see, chapter 4, if we go another 35, we could go 4 to 9. And then we could probably finish off. And I kind of want to finish it in 2 weeks. 4 weeks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read chapter 1. If it's, like right now I'm going to check the recording. So we already read about an hour. So, yeah, I'm going to just read chapter 1. I kind of regret that I can't read about matter and antimatter, but, you know, there's always next week. So, yeah, I'll just read chapter 1. And then, if it's really short... No. That's it. We'll just finish chapter 1. Alright, so chapter 1, Introduction. With skepticism, we notice that empiricism is not clear enough and rationalism is not deep enough. But with both, we discover that skepticism is not strong enough. What? Anyway. If one can argue that a piece of knowledge is more empirical, then he cannot argue that it is more rational. If he can argue that it is more rational, then it is not the case that he can, at the same time, argue that it is more empirical. So I guess part of the problem I have right now is, I guess he just jumped right into using these words, and I'm not 100% sure what he means by them. So skepticism, let me just try to give people at home my understanding at least, right? Skepticism means that, skeptical, like you don't believe it, right? You're in disbelief. Now empiricism, I'm not 100% sure, but I feel like it means, like it has evidence, you know? Now, I am not 100% sure because of the context, so, you know, we probably should look into that. Rational, kind of, usually the way we use it is to say that it's logical, so I don't really see these things being in contrast, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to look up the word empiricism pretty quickly. And I don't think I'll share the screen. Oh, no, empirical? I'll look up empiricism. Although I feel like, so a former school of medical practice founded on experience, without the aid of science or theory. Okay, so the practice of relying on observation and experiment, especially in the natural sciences. Okay, yeah. So it's experiment. Okay. A theory that all knowledge originates in experience. Okay. So we're going to go back, because I thought it was evidence, but it's experience. Which is, not too far, but it's also kind of different. So it says, well, skepticism, with disbelief, we notice that experiment is not clear enough, and thinking, like logic, is not deep enough. But with both, we discover that skepticism is not strong enough. If one can argue that a piece of knowledge is more empirical, then he cannot argue that it's more rational. The more based off experience, we cannot argue it's more... It's a little bit weird, but whatever. We'll just skip over it. Thus, with the dilemma, skepticism becomes weakened. Based on this, the attempt of African scientific experience is to increase the horizon of our knowledge and decrease the landscape of our doubt. So this is skepticism. This is empiricism, right? Western scientists are generally shy of admitting that the metaphysical in their explanation, because the classical to value the logic of the Western thought system as a tool is incapable of interpreting such extended framework. However, the fact remains that the metaphysical is part of reality as much as the physical. So again, you just jump into this is the fact. Now maybe he's going to explain it. Let's see. The field force and quantum mechanics are just good examples on one hand. On the other hand, the preference of Einsteinian relativity-driven physics to the absolutist Newtonian physics is a shrewd, albeit an abashed acceptance that reality transcends the physical. So again, he's not establishing a proof, you know? And these are also Western sciences, but he's not establishing a proof. And I kind of wished he did, because this is a big statement. Metaphysical is part of reality as much as the physical. That's a big statement. And then to say quantum mechanics, like quantum mechanics has nothing to do with metaphysics, you know? Einsteinian relativity, we usually call it general relativity, has nothing to do with metaphysics. So it's like, in fact, general relativity is very physical. You know, it's this idea that space-time is curved based off of the presence of mass. Okay, like it's very, very physical, right? And so Newton doesn't assume that space-time is curved, and that's the only difference. He believes that space-time is flat, or the reasoning is that space-time is flat. And what does space-time is curved mean? Basically, like it's hard to visualize, you know, as humans, I guess. But that's this idea that, oh yes. So, one of the, I can't remember the word now, but there's this idea that the shortest point between two, the shortest, let's say line. No, not line. The shortest path, there you go, between 2 points, right, generally speaking, is a line, okay? But it depends on the curvature of space-time, right? So, like, for instance, light would travel the shortest path between 2 points, and what happens is that if there's a giant planet, for instance, then the light would curve, as opposed, like, curve around the planet, as opposed to going straight, like to whatever point, like basically the mass of the planet will curve the light, and so again, this is a very, very physical sort of thing. Is to say that Newton underestimates the influence of mass on the I can't remember this is a scientific word for the shortest path, but Newton underestimates the influence of mass, and what Einstein does is he I guess you could say, quote unquote, correctly emphasizing that mass is actually impacts even gravity, right? Like even the gravity of things around things, you know. And so one of the best demonstrations of this, of general relativity and of so on and so forth, is you got to look into the revolution of Mercury. Okay, so Mercury is the closest planet to the sun, and so all of the other planets kind of follow this circular path or this ovular path around the Earth. Well, then Mercury is just going erratic and like making weird shapes, and so Newtonian physics does not account for that, but general relativity does. But again, it's a very physical idea, so it's just kind of like, what is he talking about? So this modern Western opinion is that, and again, I'm saying this, the reason why I'm reading this and being critical is because, you know, I actually, you know, I study this stuff, you know. A lot of people who read this stuff do not study this stuff. So this sounds good, but, like, you know, it just sounds good, like, if you don't know what you're reading, you know, because, like, these words, field forces, you know, quantum mechanics. So field forces, I think that's mathematics, like advanced mathematics that even I didn't go over in physics, but we did go for quantum mechanics. So it's just kind of like he's using these really broad fields that are like really exclusive. You know, this is PhD level mathematics. This is college level physics. This right here, relativity, is PhD level physics. you know. So very, very few people are able to check it, you know. I mean, it just so happens that, you know, I studied physics on a PhD level, so I could actually look into it. But very few people, like very few people reach that rung. And that's like the top 1%, you know, in terms of academics, or like 1%, not the top 1%, but 1%. So anyway, and unabashed acceptance that reality transcends the physical. So I don't see this. But anyway, the modest Western opinion is that these things are not yet explainable, which is a polite way of saying we have dabbled into the metaphysical and our logic cannot interpret or axiomatize our hypotheses and theories any longer. So again, this is not, at least with Einsteinian relativity, it's not at all saying, like it's legit saying, oh yeah, space-time is curved. It's not saying that there's anything metaphysical about it. It's just saying that, like, the physical universe, like, there's more to the physical universe in the sense that space can be curved. You know, the space-time can be curved. You know, but that's not anything metaphysical per se. You know, and so this makes people, and I guess part of it might be, what does he mean by metaphysical, or what should we expect to think about metaphysical? So I'll look it up right now. And again, I'm not sharing the screen because sometimes when you change the settings, you forget to change them back, and it's a little harder when you're not actually talking to anybody. So it says metaphysical. It says other relating to metaphysics, or are related to the transcendent, or to a reality beyond what is perceptible to the senses. So again, maybe you could say space-time curvature is not perceptible to the senses. I don't know if that's what he's trying to say though. Highly abstract or abstruse, or relating to poetry, especially, and so on and so forth. So again, it's good to look into words just in case maybe he might be using it correctly. So I'll look up the definition for metaphysics. It says a division of philosophy that is concerned with the fundamental nature of reality and being, and that includes ontology, cosmology, and epistemology. Abstract philosophical study, a study what is outside objective experience. So I mean, look, for the second definition, you could probably say, hey, you know what? The curvature of space-time is outside of objective. Well, I wouldn't actually say that, because really we do. Yeah. So, I mean, we observe it, but it's so minor because we are so small. You know? That, like, our mass doesn't... like, even if our mass did influence things on that, you know, relativistic scale, it's like we don't detect it because it's just what it is. You know what I mean? But like, yeah, the sun, like you could observe it with the sun. The sun is very massive. I'm sorry that I'm sick. I shouldn't be apologizing because, you know, but you guys know what I'm saying. All right, so yeah, our practices theories are any longer. This makes people like Arthur Clarke to suggest that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. This is, however, false. The problem is due to... yeah, of course this is false. There's no such thing as magic. Whatever. The problem is due to the limitation of Western classical logic, which is absolutistic. J.M. Bochansky, commenting on the relativity of logical systems, states, all this might be thought pure speculation on the part of logicians, of no importance for the day-to-day business of science. But that is not the case. In 1944, Reichenbach showed that quantum mechanics cannot be axiomatized without contradiction on the basis of classical logic, such as that of the Principia Mathematica, but that it can be axiomatized straightforwardly without contradiction in the framework of Lukasiewicz three-value logic. So that's pretty interesting. So I never heard of Lukasiewicz, but apparently somebody in 1944 believes that that this person has a logic system. And I guess he's saying that Africans also had a logic system, but it's actually it's still pretty interesting. I don't know what it means, but it's just an interesting tidbit because you know what it does is it demonstrates the author, you know, is obviously a PhD, so you know, in Nigeria, but they're going through multiple sources, to say the least. In African conception, reality consists of the physical, the non-physical, as well as the union of the two. While the first two are partial forms of existence, the third is full. The three-valued trait in African thought system derives from the metaphysics, and from it we obtain African logic, which is three-valued in character. Chris E. Gioma, in his theory of African logic, tagged harmonious monism, used it to explain healing in African science. One is healthy if there is equilibrium of physical and non-physical aspects, and he is ill if there is disequilibrium. He is mentally retarded if the non-physical aspect dominates. If, on the other hand, the physical aspect dominates, such a person is useless and merely has a vegetative existence. The incantations of an African healer are therefore aimed at restoring the equilibrium of matter and spirit. Okay, here's something. Of matter and spirit in the person. Andrew Udiog Woman and Chris Akpan on one hand, and Kirian Ojong on another, variously in their different works, employed African logic to explain some healing processes of African orthopedics. One of such processes is in healing bone dislocation or breakage would be to get a cock or a hen, depending on the gender of the patient, and cause similar bone injuries to the chicken. As the healer massages the chicken and performs incantations, the human patient would be receiving the healing effect. In Western science, this would be a typical example of a no-contact force. There is, however, not the case in African science. There is contact. African metaphysics holds that all realities exist in a network of interconnection. What the healer does through incantation is called ontological transfer. In order to ameliorate the pain on the human patient, his non-physical aspect would be transferred to the chicken. This is accounted for in African science using the law of Egwu Eji, see chapter 9. A Western scientist would administer anesthetics, which has some nasty side effects. Humans have been known to die from such. For this, we say that African science not only thrives in simplicity, but in a much safer practice. In massaging the chicken's joints, the physical injury is soothed, while the incantation would back the... Oh my gosh, this is... I'm just thinking about that poor chicken, you know? I'm just thinking about that poor chicken that's getting massaged, the leg broken, and then, you know, oh, we're going to massage it until it's better. Oh my gosh, that's crazy. The physical injury is soothed, while the incantation brings back the exited spirit and attempts to restore the disequilibrium. Anyanwu and Rook state that what African philosophy is supposed to do is to explain the principles behind our basic assumptions and thoughts. In much the same way, African logic explains the basic assumptions of African scientific practice. So that's a really interesting paragraph. Yeah, and I mean, I guess I could see what they mean about, like, if I saw this with my two eyes, I might think this was like some, like, I might actually think it was nonsense. And I'm just saying that, you know, from jump. Is that a good thing? No. But essentially, I guess what I understood was a person is injured, they have a broken leg or something, and then somebody would get a chicken, put the chicken next to them, and then break the chicken's leg, and then massage the chicken while, you know, talking. And somehow the person with the broken leg would get a fixed leg after that. Like, yeah. I mean, it sounds like something I would prefer to see. I guess if I saw it in my own two eyes, I might say, what the fuck did I just see? But I would be forced to believe it. But, like, yeah, I think the skepticism... Like, yeah, that's wild. Like, if this were true, that's very, very wild. To have no contact healing of bones. That is, like, that is insane. I don't think I would put a human through that. And you know, part of the reason why I say, like, part of the reason why it's really, really insane is because, like, what bone do humans have in common with chickens? You know? Like, I guess the leg bone, kind of, but not really. You know? Because, I mean, I could, you know, like, when I see chickens, there's a bunch of chickens around here. I do see chickens, And I guess if you like eat chicken, you could see, you know, a thigh and a leg, kind of. But like, if you really look at a chicken bone, it's nothing like a human leg. You know, like maybe you would say it's kind of like a thigh, but there's no shin. You know, there's no knees. I'm not 100% sure. Like I said, I don't. Like, I feel like I've eaten a whole chicken before, and I haven't seen much in the way of resembling a human, because it completely defeats the purpose of the arm bones, you know, or the chest bones. Like, the only thing that's possibly close is the leg, and even that is not that close. So it's just kind of like, it's really bizarre. But I mean, if it really happened, it would be an amazing thing to see. But like, somebody would have to have a broken bone in order. So it's like, it borders on cruelty. I can see that. I could see why. Like, if this was really a practice, I could see why people are not really too fond of it, because like, if somebody really did break their leg, and I'm reminded of this. There's this African spiritualist kind of guy. You know, back in the day, I used to be on that spiritualist stuff too, a little bit, and to the point where I was like, I don't want to go to the hospital, blah blah blah. But I asked the brother into the spiritual systems. I'm not 100% sure if it was this famous author himself, or if it was one of his disciples. What's his name? Oh, Mfundishi Judaism, or something like that. I don't know. Mfundishi, he's a big famous one, right? And I don't know if it was him or if it was one of his disciples, but somebody was like, I would go to the European for surgery, like for something major, but not for like medicine, you know. And I kind of have that kind of same mindset of, yeah, I would, like, I don't really want to go to the European, but for surgery, maybe. This is kind of telling you, you don't have to go to them for surgery. And I'm not saying that there wasn't brain surgeons among the, you know, in Africa. There was. But like, this thing right here where you would massage a chicken next to a person who was injured, like, if you are wrong, right, this person, like, anything can happen to this person with a broken leg. Like, anything could happen. So I don't know if, yeah, I don't know if I would, yeah, that's a tough one right there. So anyway, I mean, definitely something that you'd want to see, but it's also not something you'd want to see, because I've seen people with broken legs. Like, the screaming, the pain that they'll be going through to have a fully broken leg, and then somebody's on the side just massaging a chicken. It's like, yeah, no. I mean, I don't want to be, I mean, I know Trigger Happy, I don't know if Trigger Happy's listening. Shout out to Trigger Happy. I don't know who's listening, honestly. But like, my thing is, no, I couldn't. Like, I couldn't, like, I don't know if I could, like, I mean, I don't know. I guess in the name of science, you could, but it just seems really, really cruel. I don't know. You guys tell me, in fact. Drop in the comments. If somebody was injured, would you be okay with, in the name of science, somebody massaging a chicken next to that injured person as the injured person is screaming, you know, and canting, you know, like, I don't know. If you're okay with that, I mean, I could see, if I love science that much, I don't know, I guess you know, I opened up with, yeah, I think science is important, so, whew, that's tough. Alright, so, in the past, there's been a debate concerning the existence of African philosophy. Currently, there's an ongoing debate on the possibility of African logic. Now, again, I don't think there's a debate about these things. I think Africans definitely created these things, but whatever. It seems, therefore, that any new organization, a peculiar African or alternative brand of a given field of knowledge, would follow a rigorous process of debate. Such previous endeavors, it appeared, amounted to letting some other cocks crow beside one. These transgress the boundaries of reason and the custom of the salient community. For how can we have another philosophy and yet another logic besides the Western philosophy and logic? What would they be called? what would they be like? What would become of the traditional pedigree of the Western philosophy and logic? Indeed, what would become of us all who study, practice, and follow these fields? Interestingly, the supposed apparent dilemma, when unraveled, becomes a mere question of audacity, which degenerates on confrontation to the merit and then to criteria on standard. It's an animal kingdom where only one cock crows. The reaction which trails the sound of another cock crow is not simply that of anger, but that of shock and disbelief. The question from the onset is not on whose authority it crows, but how dare the cock make a crow-like sound. It is not that it has no permission to crow, but that it cannot crow and must not attempt to. Even if the crow-like sound is actually a crow, it is nothing but a crow-like sound. It is when the question of audacity is confronted with an accusation properly so that of prejudice that it quickly melts into concerns of merit and criteria. Before then, it does not matter if the only cock that crows gets worn out and falls short in duty on all the hens. It does not matter that many hens are left unattended to. It does not matter that others are not properly attended to. The custom and what the salient community is used to is that only one cock crows. But when audacity is forced to make way, concerns would speedily tilt towards merit and criteria. The community which opposed the existence of African philosophy, the one that opposes that of African logic, as of the one that would oppose the existence of African science, constructs their argument on the foundations of merit and criteria. Do such systems of African science have the merit to be called science? Does the so-called African science meet the criteria of the scientific community? In other words, does it meet the standard of modern Western science? If not, and which is most likely, the opponents would be quick to award it a consolation tag of mythical knowledge, of which is worse magic, or which is worse magic. So they say that African philosophy is not really a thing. Sorry, I'm just thinking about, like, what am I going to call this video, because that crow thing was, the chicken thing was just crazy. Not crazy, but I mean, yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, if I saw that, I probably would call it magic too. Like, so, but that's an interesting thing, you know, because he's saying, hey, no, this is science. And I mean, if it did happen, it wouldn't really be magic, it would be science, right? It'd just be a science we don't understand in the West, and therefore, you know, you could call it an African science. So it is justified. It's just a question of, did it happen? You know? Did it happen? Or were we told it happened? You know? I'll say this, in fact. A lot of people are here in Africa. I haven't met any. But some people that you might speak to in Africa will tell you, oh yeah, I've seen shape-shifting before. Now, me, on a level, I'd say it's not molecularly possible for something to change shape rapidly and then change back. Like, it's just not molecularly impossible. But if it did happen, would you call it magic or would you call it science? You know, and I'm partial to the idea that a lot of African spiritual systems are in fact scientific systems. So I'm partial to the idea of calling it science, and I fully embrace that this is a different science if it's happening. But the only thing I will add to that is that if you read the story of Sunjata, right? In Sunjata, now this is a real individual. He's the first founder of the I think the Mali Empire, right? But the story, all of his stories are fanciful and magical. They have magic. They have shapeshifters, as a matter of fact. So, to what extent? So it's like, would the shapeshifters be scientific? Was it scientific shapeshifting? But again, I'm in disbelief. I am a part of the skeptic crowd. Not gonna front. Because it does sound like magic to me, because I am, I guess, a Western scientist in that sense. But also because we've never seen it, you know? The reality is this, like, most people are skeptical of Western science too. You know, if you tell me, hey, if I spin this wheel around, you know, vertically, I can't, like, and then I'm sitting on a chair and then I try to tilt it one way, I'm going to turn around, I'd be like, that's bullshit. And then you could show me, and I'm like, oh, yeah, true. I guess it is a thing, you know? And I might not know the science behind it, but it's like you have to show people. So if you could show your hand, for instance, morphing into a snake and then morphing back into a hand, then obviously, without a doubt, it is possible. It's just that, you know, the Westerner does show what he's saying. and then we kind of just say, oh yeah, I saw it, you know, oh man, I tell you when I saw it. It's like, okay, but where? Like, the only thing I've seen that borders on magic among African circles might be like levitation. I haven't personally seen levitation, or levitation and standing on fire. I've seen the standing on fire thing, but not the levitation personally. Like, I've seen pictures, and like maybe people who could jump high, but not necessarily levitation. But like, if it could be done, it could be done. You know, it does not matter to them. But of course, now, how could you levitate? Like, that is an interesting question. Like, on a non-material sense, that is an interesting question, but it's not one that I'm going to answer because I don't know. This all sounds a little, you know, like, I could see what he's saying about how people dismiss it as magic. But anyway, it does not matter to them that the glittering Western science sprung from the traditions and thought systems of the Western peoples, and that in much the same pattern African science springs from the traditions of African people. It's unlikely that they do not understand that the standards of criteria of Western modern science need not to be the same with that of African science. It is plainly and more strongly the case of one cock that crows not willing to accept that another cock had crowed. However, since after the tension generated from the debate concerning the existence of African philosophy plummeted, a new consciousness has arisen within the African intellectual community. This new consciousness is the cessation of worries concerning Western acceptance of the African position. It does not matter any longer to the lieutenants of the African position whether the opponents accept or see their logic. As many as the cocks that could crow, let them crow. It is not acceptance that makes a body of knowledge, philosophy, logic, or science. It is what works for a given people. The Igbo aphorism has it, Nku di Ngba na Egulu ha ite. The firewood found in any nation is what cooks for the natives. This means that solutions to a people's problems are usually found within their environment. The environment spans from tradition, religion, to customary framework. Since scientific knowledge is in part a response to environmental challenges, environment to a large extent determines the structure of science. Thus, African environment, like its Western counterpart, technically will engender a different science from the point of their ontological and fundamental differences. The common indices, however, will be that they each squares in well with the challenges of the peculiar environment. A question may be asked, what is Western science and what is African science? We may define Western science as a body of organized knowledge without whose pursuit is tied to the principle of empirical, testable, and demonstrable protocol. So again, you see he says empirical, testable, and demonstrable protocol. So it's like, yeah, the Westerner doesn't say, like the Western science will not say, oh yeah, humans can shapeshift, right? Because he can't demonstrate it. Whereas African science is a body of organized knowledge concerned with inquiries into all shades of reality, supported with rational explanations. So you see, that's the big difference. Because what constitutes a rational explanation? And that's where I don't think that this is like, again, I'm getting more skeptical based off of this, you know. Because what you're doing now is you're putting the Western science into it's provable, and our science says, well, you know, we thought it, therefore it's doable, you know. Because the challenge is this: and again, I'm not saying this is all African science. I'm just saying this is the guy's definition, right? But has nobody else imagined alternative things, you know? Like, has nobody else imagined, like, for instance, when we talk about magic, these Westerners have like Dungeons and Dragons and shit, you know what I mean, or Final Fantasy and shit. Like, they're full of magic, but they don't pretend that it's scientific. Like, they wouldn't attach it to the word science. They would call it fiction, you know. And so I think there's a danger. And I don't know, because again, we're just reading this. It's just the introduction. This is the first chapter. But I'm now beginning to think, is he talking about fiction? Is he talking about creative writing? You know, creative thinking instead of science? And that's, you know, that's my gut reaction there. Hopefully, some of you probably had that same gut reaction. So hopefully you appreciate that little stop. But all right, let's see. Rational explanation. The difference is that in the former, scientific enterprise is restricted to a segment of reality, namely the empirical, while in the latter, there is no such restriction. All sides of reality are covered, provided the methods of inquiry offer explanations and results that are rationally tenable. Based on this, we here construct a theory of African science. So again, I would not call this, because the reason why I'm saying I'm not calling this African science, because the Europeans and the Asians do the same thing. You see what I'm saying? They do the same thing, but they don't match it up to their science. So African science should be what's empirical as well, not simply what's, because otherwise everybody already, like the Europeans have the same thing. That's the thing that a lot of us don't understand, is that the Europeans have, you know, imaginative people too. You know, they have like the world of demons and what have you. You know, demons and gods and angels and this and so forth. You could say they borrowed it from the Asians, and they could say the Asians borrowed it from the Africans. Whatever floats your boat. Or Zeus and them, you know, all that kind of stuff. They have these, you know, these witches and druids and this and so forth. They have that stuff too. So to say, oh, well, their science is good, and, you know, this is empirical, and ours, however, is rational, and you know, and blah, blah, blah. And of course, I need to look up what rational means at this point, right? But to say that our science is the one that's, you know, this, it's like, yeah, what if you can't prove it? Don't call it science. You know? Like, don't call it science. So, like call it, you know, bodies of, like, call it myth, call it magic. Don't call it science. Why would you call it science? So, I think that might be a little bit of a disservice, but we'll see. That's just my reaction. And of course, a lot of what I'm saying is kind of what he's saying, I would say. And a part of what I'm saying is because he said I'd say it. But, like, basically he heard it before. So we'll see how he kind of counteracts that argument. But so far, I don't see him counteracting the argument. But as much as he's just telling us, oh, you might make this argument. It's like, yeah. He's like, oh, but you're going to make this argument because you were told to make this argument. Like, not really. It's just that, like, it's not really because we were told to make that argument. It's just a matter of, like, that's, like, how do you say it? You know, it's hard to say, but it's like, in a sense, you are told to make that argument, but that's the whole point, you know? Like, that's the whole point. It's like, when you're talking about science, it should be something that's empirical, you know? But of course, you know, it depends on what he's talking about, because there's some parts of science, even in the Western, that that's not empirical, you know. Like once upon a time, there was an understanding of ether, you know. Like, I think during the time of Einstein, in fact, you know, even after Newton, there's this idea of the ether, and it's completely dismissed now, but it was once upon a time a prevailing idea. Or like, when you talk about sickness in a person, like when you just heard me sniffling, they call it like bile and this kind of stuff. And so you had that in the West too, you know. And of course, check this out, you would have called it science back then, you know. And in fact, because you would have called it science back then, it was kind of scientific. But that's why I kind of go into, you know, science versus pseudoscience. And again, like I said, even prevailing ideas today could be considered pseudoscience tomorrow. Science is, but the thing about that is that you want science to advance, and you want a method of advancing it. You know what I mean? Because like I said, you know, the cosmological radioactive background makes it so that, you know, the Big Bang Theory is more justified than another theory per se, right? But you have to learn to move on and say, well, you know, you can't just say, well, this is our way of thinking. This is our, you know, we always thought that the universe was, we always thought the Earth was flat. Therefore, the Earth has to be flat, and European science says that the Earth is flat. It's like, no. At one point, you did think the Earth is flat. That's fine. But after you find evidence that says otherwise, then you can't continue to say, like, you can't say it's by culture and by tradition that the Earth is flat. You know, like, you know better, so you have to do better. I hope that's clear, because like I said, this is This is a little bit of a tougher subject to get into, honestly. Let me see what the recording is like. So we're at hour and 49 minutes. I feel like 8 more pages. I think I'll sit up. Ugh. Alright, so this does not, of course, stifle the fact that what works in the West may well work in Africa too, and vice versa. Nor do we in this argument denigrate the possibility of African science bringing succor to the Western people, where Western science proves less effective, and vice versa. Indeed, such lacuna, as noticed here and there, should not draw a line between which is superior and inferior, effective and ineffective, but should be the joy of our living. Sorry for that. Therefore, the goal of this work is not to promote one science and run down the other, but to systematize and structure the African science. It is not to be disputed that the foremost challenge to doing African science at a professional level is the absence of known structure. Those who claim to practice it are scientists, priests, prophets, hypnotists, mystics, and sages all at the same time. It thus becomes difficult to separate African science from superstition, or to weld the two together. This work is the modest attempt to systematize African science and raise the standard or criteria. So again, you see that the sage and all that kind of stuff are there. So again, he never mentioned shape-shifting, so I shouldn't have myself. It's just something that came to mind when I was talking about Sunjata, and he mentioned magic, but we'll see. This work is a modest attempt to systematize African science and raise the standard or criteria so as to separate the scientific elements from the unscientific ones, outline its methods and processes so that their theories and laws could be discovered and mapped out. This research becomes chiefly relevant to the demands of our times when environmental and climatic problems posed by Western science and further insights reveal the need to tap into the wealth of scientific discoveries of ancient Africans and build to it to complement the efforts of Western science in all spheres of human life. So, justification for African science. So many African scholars have attempted what I shall call rough descriptions of African science. Some were inadvertently led into errors because they wished to do away with metaphysics. Ozumba leads this pack. Many scholars have attempted what I shall call rough descriptions of African science. Some were inadvertently led into errors because they were to do with metaphysics. Okay, so led this pack. He defines African science as the African man's way of observing, systematizing, testing, confirming facts of his environment with the aim of achieving a high level of understanding of his environment to aid him in controlling and manipulating the forces of nature to his advantage, or at least to escape the heavy consequences of uncertainty which characterize natural phenomena. So again, this is what I would call African science too. But this person says he was wrong, right? The point to note here is a reference to both facts and forces, outside of which it could be wrong to say that Ozum's definition captures the very essence of African science, which makes it different from Western science. So he's saying it's Western science, right? This is just basically the Western science done by African people, and that's okay. But this author is saying otherwise, right? So it's interesting to see how he proves that, establishes that. It is wrong to say that Ozumbo's definition captures the very essence of it. So far, it makes it different from Western science. In relation to Ozumbo, Udwaman and Udwegwaman and Akpan ask if this is the definition of African science, then what makes it different from Western science? This is exactly what the Western scientists also do, right? And that's the thing. It's like, why should it be different? But, of course, it has to be, right? This criticism is tenable because some Western-trained African scholars usually fall into the error of supposing that whatever that must qualify as science must take full empiricist dive. This leads them into unsuccessful and unhelpful attempts at weaning African science of its embedded metaphysics. Even Odwigwomen and Akpan still fell into such mistakes in their definition of what they call modern African science by excluding metaphysics, although in the body of their work they show that it is a necessary part of African science. They define it as such activities aimed at understanding, explaining, and exploiting nature for African man's use. Except for grammatical reconstructions, their definition is in every way identical with the one offered by Ozumbo, which they criticize. Oswanzu observes that the reason those who work on the projects of systematizing African science try to strike off the metaphysical is because African scientific experience in its original form is couched in or anchored on the mytho-religious method, a method evaluated as the reason for the stagnation and lack of progress of African science. So, what's interesting, like I said, the author assumes that the European and the Asian did not have like highly metaphysical cultures as well, like highly unscientific cultures as well. And by that assumption, he says, hey, look, we as Africans, we have this unique part of our history as human beings, as Africans, where we where we are, very deeply metaphysical, deeply religious, deeply mythical, right? And it's like, but that's every people, and so you're not really being different, because you got to ask yourself, on the flip side, saying, hey, what makes African science different from European Western science? Ask yourself, what makes Western religion different from Western science? What makes Western myth different from Western religion? Western myth different from Western science? And then ask yourself, how does African myth and African religion and African spirituality and African science differ? Because if you're saying, hey, all of them are the same thing, right, then you're basically saying that the European can separate the two and the African can't. And why can't the African? Or why can the European? And of course, you could, I could already hear somebody like Trigger, shout out to my brother Trigger, saying, well, Pan-Africanism said, they could dichotomize the world, they could separate they could do all that kind of stuff. And it's like, look, I like Pan-Africanism, right? So you start a bad sentence, right? I like Pan-Africanism, but the again, you can. What she did was an excellent book. We read it collectively on one of the podcasts. So make sure you guys check that out. It was a good discussion. But even so, it's not like we as Africans can't do it. It's not like we as Africans can't do it. And it's not like every European chooses to separate and dichotomize everything. It just so happens that the way how the cultures went, or the way how the world spun, that's what happened. And it didn't really happen to a large degree, in the sense that realistically, the Westerners are still very, very religious. Before I traveled around the world, in fact, I think this lady was sitting next to me, and she was like, hey, the vaccine you should take is the not Pfizer, the other one of them, like some company. And she was like, the guy who, like, she knows the person who was behind the company, like the lead scientist. And the way the lead scientist says that he got the vaccine, he created the vaccine, was he was like, God instructed him. Of course, that turned me off. But like this is the lead scientist and one of the first people to create a vaccine for COVID, and they're giving a religious origin for their invention of this scientific breakthrough. So, and of course they were working on it for several years, she said. But it's like that's the reality of this world, that even Wazungu is pretty damn religious, even on the higher scientific fields. By the way, so one may ask, are there no such supernaturalisms in the history of Western science? Oh crap, you got me. Sandra Harding, for example, describes modern Western science as ethnoscience, suggesting it to be a local knowledge system of the West but imposed on other cultures. Supporting this view, Alosi classified African science into functional, structural, and historical, maintains that science, however, in its practice, is a cultural phenomenon. This means that the African scholar who wishes to systematize African science and institute it as a field of progressive research should not shy away from affirming the metaphysical as an integral part of African scientific experience. What we call science, therefore, should be that which describes what makes up reality into African worldview. And since the metaphysical for the African is no less an aspect of reality as the physical, our science, even when systematized, must not turn a blind eye to it. In a way, describing and explaining the metaphysical is the main distinguishing factor for African science. A science which does not include the metaphysical in its map of reality is surely not the African science. So again, what he means by metaphysical, like again, I think he kind of skipped over this question. Isn't there supernaturalism in the history of Western science? I think he skipped over that. And yeah, and like again, like how do you distinguish between the two? He just says, "Oh yeah, we just kept the metaphysics," but why? You know, From the foregoing, a question may be asked: what is Western science and what is African science? If we define Western science as the body of organized knowledge, whose pursuit is tied to the principle of empirical, testable, and demonstrated protocol, they may have to define African science as the body of organized knowledge concerned with inquiries into all shades of reality and African worldviews supported with rational explanations. I feel like we already read this. The difference is that in the former, scientific enterprise is restricted to a segment of reality, namely the empirical. On the latter, there's no such restriction. All sides of reality are covered, provided the methods of inquiry offer explanation of results that are rationally tellable. I feel like this is a copy and paste, really. Rationality is here employed to depict explanations that range from verifiability in positivist understanding of the term to coherency in African logical sense of the term. So rationality is here employed to depict explanations that range from verifiability in positive understanding of the term to coherency. Based on these explanations, as we attempt to construct the theory of African science, we here offer justification for our study. The greatest challenge in the project of systematizing African brand of science is being to the question, what is the need? What can African science offer that Western science could not offer better? Answers to these two questions constitute the justification for the project on African science. We respond in 3-point paragraph. There is a need to, so basically one, the need to raise the science fit with African native thought system. Present author in his paper, Outline of African Logic for the Development of Thought, Science, and Technology in Africa, argues conclusively that African intellectuals have not excelled in inventive and theorizing exercises because the background logic of Western science is not genial to them, and not necessarily as Western scholars contend that they cannot think. Hence, raising an African brand of science with African logic as its algorithmic model will offer a fair platform for African intellectuals to compete in science and technology with their counterparts in the West. So let's see what this says. African have not excelled in inventive and theorizing. So I think a part of the real problems with African intellectuals, if we're being honest, is a lack of capital. Like if you're pound for pound, investment for investment, I think the Western scientist has way more access to capital, way more investments coming into them than their African counterparts. And I don't think it's simply a matter of, oh well, the African cannot think like a Wazungu. And I'm not saying the African can. I'm not saying the African can't. I'm just saying that I think we might be undermining. I think the bigger factor is the capital. Because another way to look at it, in fact, is, if you, again, this is a scientific way to look at it. You have Western schools that outproduce other schools too, and the big difference between these schools is how much capital is invested in them. So, like for instance, a Harvard will produce more scientists and scientific theories and inventiveness than a city college. You know what I mean? And that's just a matter of the matter. You know what I'm saying? So there's a need also for an alternative science, which will be, and I'm talking about America, Harvard and City College or whatever. There's a need also as an alternative science, which will be eco-friendly, as Western science now present serious environmental problems. The dangers facing our world and mankind in particular, ranging from tsunamis, tornadoes, earthquakes, flooding, drought, food shortages, disease, etc., which daily threaten the very fabric of life, have outgrown the capacity of Western science. Also, different scientific experiments have proven dangerous for our environment and unsafe for life. All these point to the fact that a new science that would be eco-friendly and capable of taming the excesses of nature is required. Okay, sure. There is need for a science that can offer safe and adequate energy to the world. The world is facing a huge energy crisis, which in many ways has increased the misery of men. Hunger, poverty, high mortality rate, crimes, disease, and wars are fought for the world's scarce resources. Some of the modest attempts of Western science have created technologies like nuclear power that now threaten human existence. The Chernobyl 1986 nuclear disaster and the Japan March 11, 2011 nuclear disaster are cases in point. This also shows that the world needs an alternative science since Western science has demonstrated rational stability. It is my conviction that the above 3 points provide adequate justification for the project on African science. Like, yeah, sure. Sure. It's not, yeah. Again, I can see people, skepticism, but, we just read on. You have your skepticism if you do. And that's fine. Like, I have it too, but, it's not that important to stop. So watering the ground. We have learned the logical inferences of two major types. deductive and inductive. The one moving from general to particular cases, the other moving from particular to general cases, and only recently has been shown to move also from particular to particular, from general to particular, as the case may be. The latter is primary in Western science, for if acid turns blue, litmus paper red, for example, then it becomes accepted that in all similar future experiments, acid will always turn blue, litmus paper red. This is not at variance with the process of African science. As a body of knowledge and practices which harness the powers of natural environment and attempt to solve problems confronting mankind on Earth, science becomes appropriately definable from cultural paradigms. In this light, the Chinese, or the African science, for instance, would not be a sham if its systematicity, among other things, is framed on a peculiar logic. Africans have long... So again, I don't know what he's saying. Like, I don't know why he said this, is what I mean. So Africans have long-standing... Because, like, what does this have to do with the acid thing? I wanted to explain the acid thing. But Africans have long-standing scientific practices which cut across astronomy, soil, crop, and animal sciences, but not botany, meteorology, although he says meteorology, but I think it's a typo, orthopedic, chemistry, and medical sciences. And so this is another thing to recognize, too. He is very Igbo, according to him, right? So these kind of grammatical errors, like, he might not pick up on it if he runs it by another Igbo person, right? Or another Nigerian or something like that, which is good, right? Good, but it kind of informs you now, if you're a Westerner and you want somebody to read Shakespeare, right? Because that's what you want to do. You want somebody to read Shakespeare. If you translate it to Swahili, one, you lose a lot, right, from the translation, but two, you're more susceptible to erroneous writing. And that erroneous writing is more likely to get somebody turned off to your writing. You know? And even if you are, like, you have a translator, or you give it to somebody else in Swahili to reread it, like, you can't, like, for instance, when I write a book and I have to edit it into Swahili, I mean, let's say, even if in fact, I can tell you this. If I edit a certain sentence into Swahili using, like, Google Translate, a lot of times it could be saying a completely different thing. And not just that, like I told you guys earlier about the example of the woman who, she's like, good evening at 5 o'clock, so you say good night, and then she's mad at you the next day. You know? Because even what you say, and of course I didn't say it in Swahili, but, like, if I say it in Swahili, even if I, like, whatever it is, like, culturally, like, whatever you say could have a different meaning regardless, in a different context. So it is technically the safest bet to just use English. But anyway, to mention just a few, it is perhaps only in the area of physics that Africans did not excel. Studying and understanding the laws of physics was outlawed in many African societies of old. Okay, what is he talking about? But it was abominable to aspire to such knowledge, regarded as the exclusive reserve of the gods. Severe punishment, most times death, awaited those who ventured into those areas. What is he talking about? In most African societies of old, such studies were called witchcraft, and those who were caught in the practice were executed. But just as so I don't know. So again, when you talk about, that's what people say. Like, you talk about Africa, you got to be kind of specific. Where in Africa were they killing people for practicing physics? And let me not do that. But anyway, but just as every society has its miscreants and even every law its breakers, African societies of old had people who, being persecuted, organized themselves into colonies whose primary goal gradually shifted from studying and discovering the law of physics to self-preservation. These colonies, who studied mass, weight, space, and motion, employed more industry in studying how they could traverse great distances in an imaginable time, as that would enable them escape their hunters. I must indicate that such knowledge which made that possible was not so different from the knowledge with which Western scientists built their aeroplanes, telephony, and other fast-moving objects. These colonies also studied space and discovered processes which enabled them to escape from captivity or to move from one physical point to another unseen. This also is not different from the knowledge in which Western science built the satellite, the stealth aircraft, the fax machine, the internet, and so on. So again, what he's saying here, I am interested. It does not sound like something I'm used to hearing. I'm interested, right? So, the problem was that the African societies, which was infested with deities, spiritual forces, who enjoyed the luxury of being worshipped with regular sacrifices, saw investigation into physics as something that would upturn their firm authority and therefore outlawed the practice. So again, who was he talking about? Like, is he talking about the ABSOni? Is he talking about the Orisha? What is he talking about, right? We should know that the institutions were upheld by the gods, as was most punishments. And so again, he's like, hey, look, matter of factly, these gods were just killing people for practicing physics. And it's like, where's the proof of this, you know? As was most punishments. A fact known by every African and supported in the writings by such ethnologists as Okolo, Onunwa, Onyewenu, Rook, and Anyonwu, to mention a few. So what he's saying here is that these people are ethnologists who wrote matter of factly how the gods were killing Africans for studying physics. So that Africans lived in awe of their gods is also not disputed among historians. These colonies were able to advance their knowledge by breaking loose from the authority of the gods. In most cases, when these people were captured and forced to drink from the sacred stream or eat igi from the shrines, they remained unharmed. Such scenarios struck awe to their captors, who always sought to execute them by physical means. However, stories abound of people who studied physics while still tied to the apron string of the deities. A good example is the story of Nokwa, people and Igbo community in modern-day Anambra state of Nigeria. They came to the understanding that the sun and the moon have enormous energy which could be tapped for human use. This was some centuries before Western science began to study the solar energy. They wanted to generate electrical current from the moon and the sun. The sun was a positive force and the moon the negative. They had theorized that to generate electrical power, or oku enu, as they called it, which would shine... I use them both day and night, so somebody look up oku enu. The energies of the sun and the moon would have to be tapped. These people also believed that the moon is a planet and that life could survive on it. They developed apparatuses for studying the distance of the moon from the Earth. Thus, before Western science thought of going to the moon and the outer space, Nokwa people had reached this understanding some centuries earlier. Now again, well, I don't know about centuries earlier, but again, looking at the moon and wanting to go there versus going to the moon are two different things. You know, and nobody thinks that the Westerner, you know, only wanted to go to the moon when they went to the moon. Well, they invented the desire to go to the moon, but what we recognize is that they went to the moon, you know, or they very likely went to the moon, right? I think they did, but you know, again, you know, how do you prove anything, right? These people also believe that the moon is a planet and that life can survive on it. And again, you know, like, can life survive on the moon? So they developed apparatuses for studying the Earth, blah, blah, blah. Thus before, blah, blah, blah. All right, so, and I'm just saying blah, blah, blah because I read it already. However, in one of the experiments at understanding the possible distance of the moon from the Earth, the deity of the people had roared and deafened everyone present. That night, as reports has it, it was only one out of the 12 astronauts that came down from the top of the Iroko tree. The rest were never seen. The terror of that night persuaded these Africans to abandon research in this direction for fear of incurring further the wrath of their deity. Had they gone ahead, Africa might have been the first to put the man on the space, invent solar energy, and the likes as far back as the 17th century AD, when people in Europe were still using oil lamps, riding on horsebacks, and occupied with the Reformation. Okay, but again, like, who cares? I mean, not who cares, but there's two things to it. One, because I want to say this because, like, the context for reading this book is African spirituality is a good thing, right? African spirituality is, you know, the way forward for African people, right? This kind of dismisses that. This kind of saying, hey, look, without African spirituality, right, Africa would have been like Wakanda, if you will. But, like, I don't want to use that term, but you get what I'm saying. Africa would have been space-faring, would have had solar energy as far back as the 17th century. But because, allegedly, there were gods killing, like, let's say 99% of, or not 99, sorry, 1 out of 12, or 11 out of 12, that impeded the progress of Africa. So that's kind of a L for African spirituality, if I'm being honest, right? Because of the above, I'm in this work set out to unify. Oh yeah, so another thing I want to say is that, you know, saying, oh yeah, I wish I could go to the moon, or, you know, we could create solar energy, and not doing it is just not, it's not that impressive. Because it's not to say that Europeans weren't doing the same thing, like, oh, I wish I could go to the moon, or I wish solar energy. You know what I mean? Like just because you want it doesn't mean that you can get it, or that you got it. And the idea that, oh yeah, shit, but our gods killed us, and, like, obviously they weren't the gods, or if they were, whatever, but oh yeah, I laid back down, I'm sorry. But, like, somebody killed these people, assuming the story is even true, and it might not even be a true story, but assuming it's true, somebody went around killing people for trying to practice science. That's not a good thing, because it puts us backwards. And then, of course, by the time that Europe shows up to Africa, whether they were on oil lamps and riding horses in the 17th century, they came in with guns and ships. And of course, I want people to realize the 17th century, even though Europeans were riding on horseback and shit, they were actually already colonizing Africa. So I don't know what the 17th century thing was supposed to be. But anyway, so granted the above, I'm in this work set out to unify and systematize bits of African scientific experience as were practiced and are still being practiced here and there. To come to this point, I had coordinated an international information pool across a good number of African cultures. The variables, so this is where, so you probably should start off with this. But anyway, the variables which commonly run across board constitute what I shall systematize as African science. I must warn that my language in some parts might tend to portray African scientists as having been practicing according to the standard of a systematized African science. This is because to paint a contrary picture will not help the understanding of a non-African reader. And what do you care about a non-African reader for? To retain the traditional flavor, I have decided to coin most of the terms for this new science in a native African language, Igbo, and draw some examples of experiments from the pool of African conducted experiments. Also, I must confess that this has not been an easy project, but I concede all mistakes, misinterpretations, and misrepresentations that may be contained in this work. To make sense of the very structure of African science, a good understanding of what I designate as ontological quadrant will be essential. It describes the ascending, and by the way, this is the last, this page 12 is the last, I think, of this chapter, will be essential. It describes the ascending linkage from African worldview through African cosmology, ontology, African thought system, and culminating in African logic, the latter being the logic of African science. We say that African worldview is divided into three: the world of non-matter, the world of matter, and the world of antimatter. These respectively correspond to the three universes of existence which the African scientists investigate. These three categories of existence in African science can be further classified into two: those that are natural, matter and antimatter, and those that are subnatural, non-matter. The epistemology of African science therefore recognizes that these two shades of classification of existence can be studied in African science. And this is not the right word for existence, but you guys know what I'm saying. Can be studied in African science. This runs contrary to the thesis of naturalism of W.V.O. Quine, characterized as the abandonment of first philosophy metaphysics, and the recognition that it is within science itself that reality physical is to be identified and described. And I tend to agree with the abandonment of the first philosophy. But, of course, I'm a little bit on the Western side, I suppose, if that's what you want to call it. Although, I want to say that I feel like the ancient Egyptians were, I feel like they were very scientific themselves, too. I mean, I understand people might say they are metaphysical as well, but I think it's a very complicated story. Because I only have this much time with you, I'll try to go into it. I think that they were giving children's stories. And a part of why you could even say that you think they were giving children's stories is because at some point in this book called Timaeus, which is not a historical account per se, but is an account no less, basically Plato is recording a discussion between Solon and an Egyptian leader. And the Egyptian leader says to Solon, the Greek, this is a Greek sage, he says, you guys only dabble in children's stories, and of course, as the Africans taught the Greeks, he's probably telling us that, yeah, actually a lot of the spiritual systems, he probably is saying that a lot of what you're talking about are children's stories. But some of these things which Quine, so a lot of what we call African spirituality might just be children's stories. And by children's stories, I mean something you tell your kid so that they can behave well. You know what I mean? Or so that they can grow up well. But not necessarily, the hard fact science. So anyway, some of these things which Quine designates as first philosophy are those existences which in African science are described as subnatural. Hence, for running contrary to naturalism by including in its science those things abandoned in Western science and the African system, he describes as epinaturalism, to the thesis that really constitutes the natural physics and the subnatural, non-physical, which are identified and described in African science. From this point, we can see the link between African worldview and African ontology. The latter is divided into two: the physical matter and antimatter, and the non-physical non-matter. The African thought system falls into the above two dimensions of natural and subnatural, which constitutes the two contexts within which the African coherently arranges his thoughts and tests his assumptions. However, the zenith of this ascending purification is African logic. In it, the two contexts in African thought system represent the values of truth and falsehood. But because of the interaction which occurs among the universes in African worldview, the two contexts can be unified at what I have chosen to call the context of Nzuko, or the unification context. This becomes the context of the value complemented. In Western three-valued logic, this would be called undermine. The reason for this would be explained later. All right. Thus, the three-value is created to mark the African logic. Other characteristics of this logic, therefore, come to rest on the three stands of its value. We shall explain these characteristics later. So that was pretty much chapter 1. The preface to the forward. I think that's it. So I appreciate you for coming through, reading with me. Sorry it's not live. I think I'm going to premiere this, so I will be in the chat, I believe, but you already know that if you're listening. Or you're not. I don't know. I don't know because I told it at the end. But other than that, thank you so much for listening. This was actually pretty good, pretty fun. I might name this something a little bit different, but other than that, this was the African worship, if you didn't know. So the African worship is a part of the pro-black perspective, and so every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern time, we have a podcast. Right now, I mean, obviously I'm recording this in advance, so it's like it's a little earlier for me, but yeah, this was pretty much it. I hopefully I can upload this and we can discuss this while I'm live. I don't know if it's gonna upload in time. I just noticed the time. It was like again, I'm 7 hours difference, but I might have started this around like 2 o'clock or something. So it's actually now 10 a.m. in America. So I gotta make sure I upload this. But other than that, thanks so much everybody for coming through. I appreciate your time. Sheme Motep, Anku Ja Saneb Neb, Amen, Ma'at, Dua Netra.